Hello and welcome to Carpe Diem L&D, How to Seize Your Opportunity. You know, we thought we understood what rapid change disruption meant, and then we really lived it in 2020. It was such a time of upheaval that saw L&D teams right across the globe make significant changes, whether they were ready for it or not. But what this means is in 2021, we find ourselves at a critical juncture where we have the opportunity to consolidate ships and to leverage them further. In short, it's time for L&D to embrace Carpe Diem and seize the opportunity. I'd like to introduce you to the Emerging Stronger team. I'm Michelle Ockers. I'm an organisational learning strategist based in Australia, and I'm also the host of the Learning Uncut podcast. In mid-2020, I invited my Emerging Stronger colleagues, Shannon and Laura, to join me as co-hosts in a special series we called Emergent, where we explored what L&D needs to do to emerge stronger than ever from the current period of disruption. It's wonderful to be working with two colleagues who are so committed, fully committed alongside me to supporting our industry to make change. And I'd like you to have the opportunity to meet them now. Shannon, over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was a perfect segue into what we are doing. And we all just feel so passionate about moving the needle within the industry and helping everyone emerge stronger into 2021 after everything that we've experienced in the year 2020. And even prior to the year 2020, you know, where we were struggling a little bit to identify who we are as an industry and what we should be doing. And it was really great to be a part of the podcast series where we could get all of the different ideas from all of the different speakers that we had and really generate some practical, applicable takeaways that really enlightened us all. And so as the owner of Learning Rebels, this is something that I grabbed onto because I realized that this was disruption. This was looking at things differently. And I'm really honored to be a part of the Emerging Stronger team with Michelle and Laura. So Michelle, talk to us.
I think it's time for Laura to introduce herself first.
Yeah, and what I've been loving about working with this team is that we are literally having the same conversation around the globe. All of our histories have been about helping people to just maybe challenge their thinking and do things a little bit differently in order to drive better business value. You know, whether it's Michelle's podcast being Learning Uncut and kind of opening up the practicalities of driving business value, or Shannon's work with Learning Rebels to really kind of challenge our thinking to help us be better. But last year when we came together with my background, which you'll probably maybe know me for the research work that I did for 15 years, uncovering how we can become more mature as learning organizations to drive that business value. When we started to pull it all together, it's where, how does all of our experience around the globe, how has it prepared us for emerging stronger from the challenges that faced us last year? So the conversations were fantastic, and we're really grateful that you're part of that journey with us now. So what's been happening? When we've been talking about this, literally in all of our own individual roles and also as part of the podcast as well, what we've clearly all been going through is not just disruption in learning and development, with many people having to put their programs online for the very first time, but actually fundamental disruption in pretty much every business, every family, every society, every community around the globe. We've found businesses which have been working and established, having to close their doors, close off certain areas of their business and open up others. We've found that people are suddenly having to work at home in flexible places, calling on the gig economy even more. And what we're also seeing is that CEOs and business leaders right now are saying, actually, we are not going to be going back. We're going to be going into a new future. So this has given us an incredible opportunity to be able to respond as learning professionals and really be right in the heart of the business. And what we did in our webinars is we actually asked people, you know, have you had a chance to really drive business value in the last year? And ladies, it was really interesting, wasn't it? You know, some of the insights that came out of those chat rooms. Certainly one or two of them said that of their original initiatives that they got even faster engagement. They happened to have rolled out learning platforms and suddenly the whole business was actually using them. And we've also had people talk about building more resilient workforce and our role in really doing things that are business critical right now. And ladies, I just wondered if there was anything that also jumped out at you in terms of how you felt that people were kind of responding in the learning profession to this change in business.
Laura, I thought there were two strands to the conversation that we had in the webinar. One was people were very clearly talking about how their organisations had embraced different approaches to learning and obviously digital approaches. But we had one participant say it was a gift in so many ways. So many things we weren't prioritising suddenly became a reality. So there were kind of these two threads of conversation. One is around shifts in learning, but the other, which was really to the heart of the question we asked, was around more fundamentally in terms of business value, which I know we're going to spend a lot of time talking about, and the organisation's success. We had people talking about, well, the greater speed to market. We could help the organisation with greater speed to market. We could help people to adapt to operating in the digital workplace. And the focus on wellbeing really came through as well, how important that was for our people and our organisations, and that learning and development was a key part of the agenda there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shannon, what kind of jumped out for you in terms of the conversations that we've been having literally over the last 8 months, almost consistently, hasn't it been?
Right. Yes, totally. What really jumped out at me between the podcasts and the webinars that we've been hosting was the ability to be more flexible and to be more adaptable than perhaps they had been in the past, where they might have had business pressures that didn't allow them to really flex the way that they wanted to. And now with the time that we've had in 2020, people working from home and maybe having some of those moments where certain initiatives were put on hold, and now other initiatives were able to raise up. And they were very excited by that, because some of these initiatives, their learning initiatives or digital initiatives, had remained dormant for a while. And now they were able to go back and revisit and be able to determine what were some of the stronger business priorities and be able to put those into action. So it was a little bit of a surprise to a lot of our audience for them to be able to see, oh my gosh, now we have this opportunity to be able to do some of the things that we wanted to do. And you can almost feel the excitement, coming through on the podcast as well as in the webinar and in the chat, if you can imagine being able to feel that through a chat, but you could. And it was very exciting for me to be able to read that.
Yeah, and we asked this question, didn't we, of the people in the webinar, but also we've been asking around the globe. And we've been asking, to what extent do you as a learning leader feel that you've contributed to your organization's success? Now, success for your organization in the last 12 months could look like anything. How do we get our people working remotely? How do we help people who've been out on furlough? How do we think about well-being? But the results really have been consistent. Around about 400 people we've asked this question from, and over 75% have said that we, in the last 12 months, despite all the pressure that we've been under, we've actually been able to create either a valuable contribution, or our contribution has been absolutely critical. Now, for a profession who has been saying, I find it difficult to find a seat at the table, well, there's been no table. We've all been working on the same problem, and there have been a few challenges. Some people have been put out on furlough, but for us, as the story unfolds, it's okay, how do we leverage that? And, I'll hand back over to you, ladies.
Well, how we leverage that is what we're going to talk about here. It's really now time to carpe your diem, people. And this is what we would like to cover with you in this webinar recording. 3 points. First, how can L&D emerge stronger? So we've already briefly touched on this in our introduction here, but really we want to dig a little bit deeper about how we can really take the assets that we have, the resources we have, the podcast conversations, as well as looking at things a little bit differently, and then be able to emerge stronger here in 2021 and moving forward. This means then, how can we better spot the business opportunities that are now in front of us? And this is looking at our challenges in a completely different way, moving from looking at things from a learning perspective to a business perspective. This means then that we're taking a new look at how we use traditional methods. And I've said this before, this is about, we can't solve today's problems with yesterday's thinking. So now it's time to take a new look at what we're doing. So then let's talk about how we can emerge stronger in 2021. How does that look? How does that feel? What are we recognizing as these opportunities? So the question that we asked was, what would it look like to emerge stronger? What would it actually look like? So a lot of times we have this gut feeling. We imagine that success looks like this. We have instincts that this is what success will look like to us. Now, the question that we asked our people that joined us on the podcast, as well as the people who participated in our webinars, was an actual vision. If you were to put on your rose-colored glasses, what would you see as success? What would you hear? What behaviors would be identifiable? What business results would be identifiable? So let's look at this from actual reality. What would it look like to emerge stronger? And from this, our podcast told a story.
Absolutely. And, I think the critical things about this podcast, it really reflected the conversation that we also had in the webinars as well. In the webinars, we were talking about things like, building a more resilient workforce, shifting our mindsets, being proactively ready for stakeholders. And yet what we found also in the podcast, you can see some of the themes that we talked about, and you can go and revisit those because they were absolutely packed full of insight and ideas. But there were some really strong themes that were coming through. And the first one was about, are we ready to respond to business reality? That we can really be ready for that. And that certainly was reflected in the conversations. Can we challenge our own thinking and also challenge the mindset of those around us? And again, Michelle, that was picked up in the conversation as well, wasn't it? There, how do we build our own capacity and capability? And how do we do more experiments that we're willing to step out? It's created this great environment where we actually can be more willing, and it's okay to actually try something that's new, because let's face it, everything's new right now, so it's the fact that we can all do that. And then also, how does our activity, our attitude, our new way of thinking about solving business problems, how does that have a knock-on effect on influencing organizational culture? So I will leave these up here for a moment, but also there's some things that went on in the chat room as well when we were running the webinar, where we were asking people about their views as well. And again, Michelle, did anything kind of jump out at you from the conversations that we were having with the audience?
Look, at a high level, I think there were two different threads to the conversation when we asked people, how can L&D emerge stronger? And to Shannon's point, what will that look like? What will you see? What will the conversations be like? What will you be doing differently? And one thread was almost the consequence of doing things differently. And that was the idea that the value of learning and development really be deeply recognized by others, and a sense that that shift is already happening. So that was about recognition. It's about credibility. It's about reputation. And those things would be part of having a seat at the table and being involved in business decisions. So once we've got the seat at the table, we can get involved in business decisions. But then there's this other thread of conversation, which certainly came up in the podcast, that, don't wait for that seat to be offered to you, just take it up. So in terms of action, one thread of the conversation was that L&D would have shifted what we focus on with this key idea that we'll be working towards business goals and performance improvement rather than providing products and services. And there were some suggestions about specific types of improvements we'd be making in the business. So one is around what will it look like when we've got the reputation, the credibility, and the other is, well, what is it really going to take us to get that, which I think is very interesting, the action, rather than the expectation that someone's just going to pull up the seat and give it to us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the things that Geraldine, who was one of our speakers and also joined us on the webinar as well, she said that we'll be stronger and we will have emerged stronger when we're approached as a true partner to achieve business goals. Now, I wanted to read that very specifically because it wasn't about being a business partner, but that people see us as working side by side to help solve business problems. And I think that is one of the things that really came out. And, you know, the three of us have been talking about what it means for us. What would we like to see as a result of the work we've been doing together? And, you know, on the next slide, we've kind of highlighted that, you know, as for us, a stronger L&D will have built those powerful business propositions and business cases. So we will have connected what we do clearly with business value and initiatives. And to Geraldine's point, nurtured those stronger stakeholder connections, prepared ourselves to do that. But Shannon, I know the last three really mean something to you as well. You wanted to put those at the top, didn't you? And it's like
I wanted to shuffle the deck a little bit, but I do see this as being interconnected. You know, so it's not really a list. They are all of these points are so interconnected with each other. And when we talk specifically about points 5, 6, and 7, this really does touch to the heart of what Learning Rebels in particular is all about, and what the Emerging Stronger team specifically is trying to do. And we realize that in order to affect change throughout the industry, the way that we want to affect change, and in our heart of hearts, it's about increasing the confidence to be able to do so. And one of the foundations for Learning Rebels is about being able to challenge the status quo and have courage of conviction. And when I saw this and we went back through all the data and we saw these 3 points, it really resonated with me that together we're all on the right track here about developing that stronger voice and about enhancing the overall reputation and credibility of not only yourselves, but of the industry, and therefore increasing the confidence in everything that we do. And this was just so important. And I feel that it lays a really critical foundation to what we want to achieve, and therefore about how we want to further spot the business opportunities, right? To be able to do this, we must have confidence in what we do. What do you think, Michelle?
I think that's absolutely right, Shannon, that if we're going to emerge stronger, we need to be able to first spot those business opportunities, which starts with being clear about what business value actually means. And Laura, you've created a really nice framework to help us distinguish between learning value and business value. So let's have a look at that.
Yeah, I think obviously the three of us have been working in this world for quite a while. We've been supporting organizations, been working with organizations, been researching organizations. And often when you ask a learning professional, how have you been able to demonstrate your success? We often will fall on at some point of this spectrum. To the left-hand side, I've been talking about learning value. And that's when we're looking at what we do and how we assess our own value, our activity, our open rates, our efficiency, how much money we've saved, how much time we've saved, how many, that more for less argument that we have there. We've seen this year engagement go through the roof, like 5,000-6,000% more engagement, because to be quite honest with the content on our platforms, this has often been a lifeline. So engagement has been important to us. And more and more, we're actually starting to see people say, well, has what we've been doing been useful to individuals as well? Looking at net promoter scores and people's intention to change after an initiative. But what's really struck us in this emergent series, and also it's been hitting my heart for the last 15 years of research, is that those who start at the other end of the scale and first say, actually, what is the business problem we need to get involved with? What's the performance issue? You know, we've got to roll out something faster, speed to adoption. How do we get everyone up and running remotely? You know, business KPIs, looking at the critical tasks that individuals have to do, and ultimately looking at the culture of an organization. Are we agile? Are we ready? I've always said that our key role as learning and development professionals is to get others ready, and also to get us ready for change, to get us ready for the future, to get us ready for getting better. So the value spectrum is really about challenging us. Where are we starting when we're starting to work? And in the last year, we've seen more and more people start, because we've been thrown in at that deep end of we're all part of solving the business problem. And that's when we start there, when we get the right problem to solve, we're aligned with really what's going on in the world of work. That will actually is the first foundation step for us to emerge stronger. And I know, guys, we've been talking about this forever, haven't we? So move on, or else I will just keep on with this slide. Michelle, you've got an example, haven't you, about how you've seen someone recognize that business opportunity?
Absolutely. And I think to your point, Laura, lots of us were thrust into a situation where we were by default, because of the urgency of responding to the pandemic and helping our organisations adapt, we were automatically in that space of business performance, at least for a period of time. But we're not like hacking through the jungle here. We've got examples to draw on as to what good looks like. And companies, organisations where the L&D teams were already doing this and working more on business problems. One I really love is Cotton On Group. And I spoke to Beth Hall from Cotton On Group University in Learning Uncut episode 33. They're in clothing retail, and her team at Cotton On Group University works intensely with business data. They actually look at the retail KPIs, the same KPIs that business is looking at every single day, and they regularly review customer voice in order to spot opportunities. And as Beth says, everything we do has to tie back to a business metric. And one example of a metric that they tie their work back to is average spend, which for her indicates that their retail staff are helping their customers to buy, and that their learning and development team is helping their staff to achieve this. So I think use of data, great example to help recognise the opportunity. Shannon, I think you've got an example for us.
Yes, the way that Brunswick looked at this, the issue, actually to back up, the issue they were having was about management turnover. And Brunswick is an umbrella company, and within it you have boats. People might recognize it from boating, fitness equipment, bowling, a variety of different organizations within it. And I was working specifically with the bowling division with their bowling centers. And their bowling centers, you need managers. And the issue they were having was a high turnover in their training program for those managers. The turnover was 52%. And it would have been really easy to throw yet another training program out there in order to say, well, this training program will help decrease the turnover. But when we stepped back and took a different look, I wanted to look beyond training programs. I wanted to really get to the root cause of what was happening there. And what it turned out to be was community. There was a lack of community for the new people who are coming on board, those that were college educated, who were coming into high potential programs. There was no place for them to gather, communicate, collaborate, share stories, and they felt isolated. And because of this isolation, they could not connect to the business. And so subsequently, they went someplace else where they did feel connected to a business. And so community, when you looked at the issues through that community lens, if you will, the turnover rate originally at 52% went down to 21% in the course of a year. Huge. And that, of course, impacts all of the bottom line results. So that was a really great example to be able to say, let's look at this beyond training and take another point of view.
Yeah, and I think that in the webinars themselves, people were saying, okay, well, how do we spot when something's a business opportunity rather than opportunity for us to provide a program or a course or a piece of e-learning? And it was really interesting. One of the conversations was about the fact that we shouldn't be guessing at what the business problem is. And what I love about the two examples that we've heard so far, people getting completely involved with the business in order to really feel and understand what the business problem is. And an example that I love, which is Hilti, which is the global construction company. Yes, they use data, and yes, they were listening to people and said, well, actually, we do need to change how we do learning. Absolutely, because what they were doing wasn't fit for the way that their 4,000 construction workers were working around the globe. But what they did was also bring in a system and a process and a language that allowed business people and learning people to discuss what was going wrong together. And they started to use these identified small projects, building the habit of talking about this with a process and with a language. And it kind of surfaced all kinds of little projects. One of the projects was about serving the service quotes into invoiceable revenue. Obviously something all of us like. Currently at the original time, the 25%. But by working through a process of surfacing what are the critical tasks that's needed to us to address here, how do we address those if we put our idea of courses aside, working hand in hand to co-create a solution to that problem, they upped the conversion rate within 6 weeks to 40% and over a period of time to 70%. So, there are different ways for us to be able to surface opportunities through data, through conversation, through process, through common language. And for us, we believe, I think ladies, that to emerge stronger, we got to spot the right opportunity to be working on in order to build our muscles. Michelle, what do you think?
Well, I think it's very clear that working on a business problem is essential to creating business value. It almost goes without saying, but it's important to put it out there and keep our eyes on very clearly business value and creating value as our North Star. But sometimes we think we've spotted a business problem or a business opportunity, and we're not quite sure. We've come up with a little checklist that you can use to do a reality check, a couple of questions you can very quickly ask yourself to check in. And if you've uncovered one, then you should find this checklist really easy to answer. So the first part of the reality check is going to sound really familiar. It's that old chestnut about, is this keeping my stakeholders up at night? In other words, does it really matter to them? And what does it mean in terms of what they can accomplish? The second part may be more of a challenge and something we're not as used to doing. Try articulating, try stating the challenge and how you can help solve it without using the words learning or performance. Language is so important, and if we can put it in business language, we know that we've struck upon something that is indeed a business problem. If it's not easy to answer these questions, then it's time to think a bit more about the challenge and to get your eyes and ears, your body, your hands back out into the business to explore further.
So we're back here, aren't we, Michelle? So I love what you just said about using your body and your hands, because that's all about action. And it's all about creating that action, about taking what we know and applying it, and then applying it to what that business issue is, right?
That's right. So assuming we get through a reality check and we confirm that we've identified a business problem, the next question then is, how do we approach solving it differently, both in terms of how we're thinking about it, our mindset, as well as the action that we take differently in order to create business value. And Laura, we've got a new take on perhaps some traditional methods that we've identified, some fresh approaches as well to tackling this.
Absolutely. And we've all talked about performance consulting and designing learning for performance. And we felt that when we analysed the podcast responses, what people were saying about how do we emerge stronger, how are we emerging stronger, we realized that overall, people who were really being able to use this incredible disruption to actually really focus in on business goals was looking at them slightly differently. And we identified basically 4 new lenses to be able to hone in on that business goal. And one was the lens of data in its broadest sense. We've already talked about the role of data in how we can surface the right problem, but also how we use data that is numerical data, quantitative data, qualitative data, conversations. How do we use that data to create the right narrative around what we're doing? And does that help us to work better with others to solve the problem? And working better with others is also about the lens of community. It's not just about communities of practice or the things that historically we've done as a learning professional, but how do we work differently with partnerships and with those kinds of processes? I mean, Shannon, have you also been thinking about the last 2 on that slide as well, weren't you, about experiments and technology as well? So, you know, they were 2 other lenses that we saw there as well. So, Michelle, what do you think? How does that actually work? Because I know the 3 of us have been talking about this all the time, about looking at a problem, a business problem, through a different lens. Can you share an example with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wait, let's stop.
We need to do that one again.
Yep, let's go back.
Yeah.
Because I did on that too quickly. So we'll take a beat. We'll take a couple of beats. And if we can start over on this slide, is that okay, Laura?
Yes, it'll be completely different, but we'll start over.
That's fine. That's fine. So like I said, we'll give it a couple of beats. Pardon me?
Yes, do all 4, Laura.
Yeah, do all 4.
Okay, sorry.
Start at the top. And I jumped the gun on that when I heard community, and I jumped the gun. So I'll wait until you wrap it up with technology, and then I'll flip the slide again. So let's give it a couple of beats of silence so that we have an editing point, and then go when you feel comfortable. All right.
So one of the things that we saw when we were looking at the transcripts from all of the podcast interviews was that those who we were interviewing had actually either emerged stronger or already kind of flexing their muscles, or they found that they were prepared to take on change. And so we looked at where some of the common themes that were kind of coming up in those interviews that could be helpful for us. And we identified kind of 4 lenses, 4 different ways of being able to look at you know, kind of hone in on how we can solve that business problem. The one we've already indicated is to look at data, but not just data in helping us surface what that problem is, but the whole role of data, the role of data in helping us be able to track whether or not we are doing well, the role of data in being able to help us connect and engage in smarter ways and be part of the business. So there's a lot of different roles of data that we could actually use to help us hone in on getting much more creative at working with the business to solve those business problems. So we felt that was a very important lens. And in terms of working with the business, the other lens that we saw was the lens of community. And again, looking at that in its widest perspective, not just looking at, say, for example, communities of practice or how to attach a community to a piece of learning that we're already doing, but the way that we actually work with others, with our partners, with the business, with our learners, with managers, in teams. How do we bring that together? There was a very clear focus right the way through, naturally, on technology, but not just about learning technology, but the way that we harness the technology that's in people's hands, that they're familiar with, that's already going on. And wrapping around that was our willingness, we've already discussed that, to be able to experiment. You know, what if we didn't do it in the way that we've always done? What if we don't just take what we did and bring it online? Is there a better way? Because now what we've seen is there is more opportunity for us to really connect with the business problem in a new way. There's more freedom. There's more kind of expectation that actually it's okay to try something new, because let's face it, the whole of the world is trying something new. But Michelle, you know, we don't want this just to be abstract. The three of us have been working through these lenses all the time, but you've got a great example of what it means to apply a lens to a business problem rather than a learning problem. Can you kind of make a little bit more sense of what I've just said, please?
Absolutely. And one of the really important parts of the collective research that we've been doing in the conversations we're having is to bring these ideas to life with examples, with real world examples to show what it could look like. And using the community lens, I've got one example of what that could look like and how that can shift how we approach business opportunities when they're presented to us. This comes from my own work at Coca-Cola Amatil a number of years ago, where a long tenured engineer who'd been with the organisation close to 4 decades, he was approaching retirement. And the national engineering manager came to me. I was leading our technical academy and supply chain. And he said, look, I'm concerned that all the stuff he knows, he's a key go-to person, constantly answering questions, educating the younger engineers, the maintenance staff, helping them solve problems. I'm concerned that's all about to walk out the door. And I know this kind of situation will be familiar to others in different contexts. He said to me, can you take one of your team members, have them shadow this guy, extract what he knows, put it into courses and resources? Again, I bet many people watching this video have had that kind of request. Now, without using the community lens, we might have gone ahead and done just that. However, when we apply the community lens, it takes us to different places. So if we'd applied it in the context of, well, this is a learning problem, we might have taken the step of saying, okay, well, we're going to attach some communities of practice, some knowledge sharing spaces in our learning platform off the back of courses, so people can interact around the content of the courses that we've created. That's better, but it doesn't really get to the heart of what happens when we treat the business problem through the community lens. So we did just that, and we started a conversation about, firstly, why was this a problem and what impact was it having? We're getting some clarity on that. We then went outside of the organisation, out into the network, to look for examples of how other organisations had addressed similar problems and what we could learn from this, particularly those in similar industries. We engaged external experts in the areas of knowledge sharing and working. And this wasn't on a paid basis. This was through, for instance, my network and external community. I found people who had expertise in knowledge sharing that was relevant, and asked them to have some conversations with myself, with the national engineering manager, to explore what might be going on here and how could we get different insights into what was happening in the business. We then got out into the workplace to do some observations, to speak with the engineers and the maintenance workers that they worked with, to really understand how they solved their day-to-day problems, who they were interacting with, what sort of conversations they were having, how they made improvements. What we didn't want to do was solve this problem once. We wanted to put in place something that meant that the next time someone was going to walk out of the business, which is natural, it happens, that body of knowledge didn't go out with them. So what we discovered, we went to suppliers as well who are working with our maintenance teams, our engineers at different sites, and we drew them into the conversation. So really broadening the network and who was involved and what perspectives we brought in. And we discovered that underlying the risk presented by one engineer leaving the business were issues with connection and knowledge between the workforce across different sites. There was this amazing reservoir of untapped potential because people were not able to connect fluidly with relevant others to help solve problems, to help share their knowledge across the business. So the solution we implemented was actually a solution in this case where we built a community of practice, but not in a learning space. We built it in spaces using platforms and tools that they used for their work. And we anchored everything we did to support them to kind of get why they would use this different approach, why they would connect with others, which they were hungry to do anyway, and to give them skills to use these spaces in a different way, to reach out and connect with each other, and practices so they would think about connecting with each other, sharing back into the network so the knowledge started flowing around instead of being locked away. This was far more effective as a long-term solution than anything we might have done just working with this single engineer. So I think this is a great example of the community lens in terms of diagnosing and understanding what's happening, understanding the audience, getting input from the external network, and in this instance, community actually being a core part of the solution and setting up really effective working networks for people. So we've got lots more examples to share with people as we work through Emerging Stronger, which is where we land now, Emerging Stronger in 2021, Shannon.
Absolutely. So now we're all ready to move forward. I think we're ready to, shrug off the year 2020 and really, as the image implies, just break free and make use of all of this information in a good way, as I like to say, using our powers for good instead of evil, and being able to say, let's move on, let's refocus, let's retune. And so here is what we imagine.
So to your point, Shannon, in some cases, it's about shrugging it off. I think in other cases, it's about maintaining the momentum and recognizing we made tremendous shifts. And those shifts in 2020 have put us in a place where there's great opportunity for L&D right now in 2021. And if we're going to seize those opportunities and emerge stronger, we need to know what it looks like to add business value rather than just focusing on learning value as a start point. This starts with recognizing the opportunities for change and taking action to solve business problems. To the point that I know you've made many times, Shannon, we can't solve today's problems with yesterday's thinking. A new approach is required. And while we may be good at talking about this approach, real action will only happen, real change will only happen when we take action, Laura.
And you know what, I think, Michelle, what you're describing there, it's actually liberating. To be progressive in our industry right now is actually liberating, and we have an opportunity to be able to do that. And you've described it so eloquently. And the sorts of things that we've surfaced, again, prior to 2020 and also during the podcast series, is that we need to take action on the way that we think about these challenges. Do we want to add learning value or do we want to add business value? We need to clarify what that opportunity is. Are we sure we're working on something with the organization that's actually really meaningful? Are we willing to actually challenge if it's not? Can we shift our point of view on typically the habits we've built up from doing learning and development in the old world have been creaking and straining, which is why these new lenses allow us, it gives us that freedom to look at the problems in a new way. We give ourselves permission to actually do that. And then when we can spot something new, are we willing to experiment? Are we willing to do something? Are we willing to reflect and adapt and kind of really make that change? And we believe from the conversations that we've had that this is essential, but also it's a bit tough to do when we're kind of on our own and we've been really so ingrained in the past, it's hard to break free. So we felt that those conversations we had with the podcast, they're great to listen to. But Shannon, we've got to take action together, haven't we? So, that's, I guess, why we're still hanging out together and energized by this opportunity.
Absolutely. And this is the end result. Actually, it's not the end. It's the beginning, isn't it? We've taken all of the information that we've gathered from the podcast speakers that we've had that were so generous in sharing their stories and their knowledge. And what we're hoping to accomplish is to further explore the mindsets and the thinking habits that hold us back and which ones drive us forward. And in this Masterclass series, we are going to be covering the different lenses, going into more detail about how to use those lenses to help you solve your own business challenges. And within this, you're going to bring your own business challenge. It's not going to be a masterclass where people are talking to you. We're all working together. And to use Michelle's analogy earlier, we're in this with our hands, our arms, our bodies, and our minds to be able to change and adapt and to share and to reflect. but also to put rubber to the road, to use an American saying there, to put rubber to the road, which means that one of our lenses is all about community. And so we've built this community. We're not depending on, training courses or learning courses for everybody. We really want to bring people together and look at this through a community lens. And subsequently, we've built this network for people of like minds and like issues to be able to talk and connect and collaborate and to bring people together across time zones. So the master classes are held over 2 sessions over multiple time zones, so not to leave anybody out. And you can come back and reflect on the information that you've gotten, on the work progress that you have made in this network, and using the tools and tactics to apply those to the new lenses that you've experienced and that you can see happening within your own business. And so right now what we have is our early bird special, which is open until February 14th. So we encourage you to take advantage of that special, because what happens is as soon as you get on board with the masterclass, you are part of the network, and you want to be part of the network early, because what we're going to do is we're going to help you walk through your business challenge, the one that you're going to bring with you. Is it fit for purpose? And you want to be able to have those conversations as soon as you possibly can, and also meet the other people that are going to be in the masterclass with you, as well as have opportunities to talk with Laura, Michelle, and I, and really build the strong foundation for our community. So we're really hoping that you join us early and take advantage of this. And again, the early bird date ends on February 14th.
And to Shannon's point, we recognise that change takes time, and we're committed to this. This is not a one-shot thing. There's actually, as Shannon said, 2 repeats of every session. There's actually 6 masterclasses over 3 weeks, and then the community out to the end of 2021. So if Emerging Stronger is for you, if you are an L&D leader who's in a position to make or influence change in your organisation, if you are keen to take action, if you want to draw on deep expertise, real-world examples, and the collective wisdom of a body of progressive peers. We'd like to thank our sponsorship partners for their commitment to supporting change in our industry as well. Go One, our platinum sponsors, and our bronze sponsors, Best at Digital, Online Learn Live, and Model Thinkers, who share our vision for a much stronger, relevant, effective L&D profession. Who have taken the most of the opportunities presented to us in 2021. So we hope that you can join the masterclass and the Emerging Strong community to help you seize the opportunities you were presented with in 2021. Now is our moment. It is time to seize the day, L&D. But whether you are all in, whether you're curious but unsure, or whether you just want to keep following us for new resources, new ideas, be sure to follow Emerging Stronger. You can access all of our social channels through the website, emergentmasterclass.com. We hope to stay engaged with you in this really important conversation, and more importantly, to support you and a body of progressive peers to take action at this critical time in 2021.